Welcome to the Power of Music podcast, brought to you by JM International. Get ready to explore conversations with those making a difference through music.
Hello, and welcome everyone to the Power of Music podcast, provided to you by JMI, Jeunesse Musicale International, a global network of NGOs that empowers young people through music across all boundaries. Today we are recording from Harare, Zimbabwe, where the JMI Global Conference is hosted. My name is Ricardo, and I'll be your host, and for this episode I'm joined by Vera Chisvo. Vera is a Zimbabwean-based funky jazz vocalist, arts and events coordinator of Magamba Network, and she also runs an incubator.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
First question, what has been your journey into music?
Oh gosh, my journey's been quite crazy, like to say the least. I initially just always wanted to be a musician, and then my first experience on stage was actually by accident, and it was a school production when I was 7. And because I was short, normally you didn't get like the big roles in the Christmas plays because you're like short, so you're probably like an animal or something very irrelevant.
Is that like a rule?
Well, at my school at the time, apparently it was. So by mistake, the music teacher cast me as a shepherd. And she also then our class teacher cast like taller girls as shepherds. And then there was a solo that needed to be sung. And none of the tall girls wanted to do it. But I was like, I'll do it. Like, as long as I get to keep my part as a shepherd. And I performed, and like from there, like the whole school was like, oh damn, like you can actually sing. And from there then, I got into like Eisteddfods and joined the choir, and then that kind of like continued. And then when I got to high school, I really didn't want to be in like the formal like school choir because I felt it was too rigid, and like you had to learn all of this like classical music, and I just really wasn't into that because I felt like anything to do with the creative industry just needs to be natural. It just needs to flow. And then again, by accident, Haifa was happening, and Haifa is like the biggest festival in Zimbabwe. And my friend was asked to be a part of this project with like this American producers that were going to come to Zimbabwe and collaborate with Zimbabwean artists. So the one day she just asked me to walk her to the hotel where they were meeting, and then I decided to linger. And then the festival director walks in, and then he looks at me and he's like, what are you doing here? So I freaked out, and I was like, oh, I'm a part of the artists that are performing. And next thing I knew, I was on that project too. So I was like, oh, again, by accident. So my career's basically been like just chance moments, being at the right place, being afraid to tell the truth, and just finding myself, making it. But it's been interesting. After college, I couldn't finish my college degree because of finances. So I didn't want to sit at home and do nothing. So I used to just go and attend a lot of open mics. And from there, I then became a backing vocalist for a very popular artist. Her name is Tarirone Guitarist. She's also my cousin, so rigged again. And then she had these events that were kind of like open mics, but not quite, that I started performing at. And then the one day, she was just like to me, she's like, listen, start a band, like, just do it. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I was like, okay. So I started a band, and we rehearsed so much. Like, we rehearsed like we were getting ready for, the halftime show. But we never performed. And then we eventually, again, a friend of mine was like, listen, girl, you can't just be rehearsing with no end. You need to plan a concert. So he was like, plan a concert. So I planned a concert, and we filled up, and we were just like, okay, who knows us? How are we filling up a whole venue? And it was like 100-seater venue, so it was cute. And then from there, we started getting bookings. We applied for Haifa. We got into Haifa. We performed at Haifa, and then there was a festival director from Botswana who was like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. He booked us for a concert. And then we're like, what is happening? Like, this is, okay. I was like, I guess this is how it happens, like, in the big league. And then, I started applying for different things. I got to go to Germany for the Pop Culture Festival, which was really great. And then again, the money question started coming into play, where it's great, you get gigs like every now and again, but the issue is that like it's not consistent. So I had to get a formal job, and the music kind of started suffering a bit because of that. So I kind of was in a lull for like 2 years. But then because I kind of got into a bit of a depressive state, and I used to say to my friends that I was like, if I'm not doing music, it depresses me. But if I'm not doing it well, it also depresses me. So it was like an awkward kind of situation to be in. But eventually, like, I was like, you know what, I'm going to push for another 2 years. And if I don't see a change or growth in my career, then I'm just going to quit and just like accept that like it's not my space. And then I got asked to apply for the job I'm working at now because they knew me as a musician. And I was like, I have no degree, but like they gave me the job. So I was like, okay, so maybe the music thing is working out. And just like a beautiful testament, like just to conclude the question, because I could go on for like 5 hours, is the organization where I work at, they run a festival called Shoko Festival. And I used to apply every single year. I think for a good 5 years, every year I applied for this festival and I never got in, but I would get in as like someone's backing vocalist or someone's, you know, I would find myself on the stage, but never as Vera. I was just always like the backing artist. And last year they changed my job position and they said, okay, we want you to run the festival. And I was like, you know what? You guys never let me perform, but now I'm running the festival. So that's a great success story for me personally.
That's a comeback.
Exactly, it's a great comeback. And then, funny enough, this year I'm performing at the festival. So I was like, oh, so you hire me and then you also book me to perform. So that's also just really, really great. A great, like, cool story to tell people. So yeah.
So it all started by being accidentally cast
Exactly.
as a shepherd, like one does.
Yeah, exactly, like one does. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the story for everyone, I feel.
It's like, I thought there was going to be something unique story, but this is something I've
just
heard over and over
over
again.
and over again, yeah,
the
just-
shepherd one.
Exactly, yeah. So, yeah.
And then for other people that have not yet listened to your music, can
Yeah.
you say a few things about it? Like, what kind of music do you make?
So I hate this question so much because initially, it's fine. I tell this to all the people who interview me, so don't feel special. So initially I started off doing like soft rock and like indie, and then I changed my band and they were all very jazzy. So every time I'd be like, oh guys, this is my song, and they're like, yeah, that's cute, but we're gonna play it like this. But they also tried to stay quite authentic to like my indie sound, and then we just created something that just sounded very different. So every time I tell people, oh, I'm a jazz artist, like my band would be like, no, you're not. Don't lie. So I was like, okay, fine. So I was like, is it Afro pop? They're like, no, it's not. So I was like, so we'll create our own name. So I call it funky jazz because it's jazz with everything else in it. And the beautiful thing that I feel about jazz is that yes, it does have certain rules it follows, but it also encompasses like all the different genres. So you can have like jazz that sounds a bit like rock or like blues or whatever. So the name funky jazz. And then like the lyrical content is just always like storytelling. I guess like every musician, like it's storytelling, but like I think of the, you know, Pop's like, I like to walk on a Sunday. But like, I always wrote from like a place of frustration, and I always tell people, I describe myself as an angry artist because like 90% of my music, I'm complaining about something. My very popular song, which is called End of the Road, I wrote it because my dad annoyed me. And then, but like when you hear the song, a lot of people are like, oh, it sounds political. I'm like, yeah, well, I guess it's relevant in both kind of contexts. I write about, you know, relationships, but like always from like the negative perspective. I have like 5 love songs. But yeah, it's mostly just like, because I feel like those are like the common stories that a lot of people don't talk about. So if it's like promiscuity, but like I won't write about it from the context of, oh, he cheated on me and I'm upset, but like from the context of I'm the side chick. And I got into this relationship with this guy, and then he decided to, you know, fix his marriage or whatever. So how do I feel? So those stories are the stories I like to tell in my music. And a lot of the times people are like, who hurt you? And I'm like, no, and I just think it's fun to write about this.
So these are not personal experiences.
No, but like most of the times when people ask me just to make it exciting, I you know, just like add some substance. But like, I think sometimes there is some kind of relation to the story. Like, I've never been like a side chick to a married person, but I've had conversations with married men who talk about, oh, why they cheat and things like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm understanding that context, but I'm like, then I write from the perspective of, okay, if you're approached by a married man and he hits on you and he tells you the story, and then you're like, okay, and then, you go along with it, and then he decides, no, I'm going to try and make my marriage work. How do you then feel in that context? Or if you're the girl who has a guy and then he comes with a pregnant girlfriend, like, how do you feel as a girl in that situation? And like, especially from an African context, you have to, like, your family will be like, well, at least he wants to marry you. So like, you're kind of forced into that kind of situation. There's another song that I have that's called Happy Clown. And I was kind of going through like a bit of a depressive like state, but like no one would have known in my close circle of friends because I'm always smiling and happy and like in a great mood. And so in that song, it's like a clown that goes for therapy. And the therapist is like, I've never heard of have you ever heard of a depressed clown? Besides the Joker, maybe. But like just writing from that context of like, I know a lot of people who suffer with, mental health issues, but like they feel like they can't express it. And when people talk about like, things like suicide, they're like, oh my gosh, how did he do it? Or why did they do it? Like they were so happy. But you're like, because it's like the happy clown syndrome where you must always just be happy and cheerful and,
It's the mask that
exactly. The mask that you put on. Yeah.
And to go back to the festival work, what is it that you do exactly there?
Okay, so I'm the arts and events coordinator at Magamba Network. So I basically plan and idealize and coordinate events that we do. So just besides the festival, we have a lot of other creative events that happen like at the organization. And then our biggest thing is the festival, that we host every year in September. So basically now I'm the person that kind of puts the pieces together.
To makes it work.
Exactly, yeah. Initially, before, we just had like one person who would kind of ideate everything, like the different nights and how they run. But we've started like outsourcing to a lot of people. And then this year, like I guess the new thing that I brought in is I just said, we're not the cool kids anymore. We're getting older. We need to actually go to the young people in the industry and give them a chance to like showcase like what they think is like cool and what's great, and then have them come up with like a whole evening performance. And so that's something that I'm really excited about for this year, because it's something we were experimenting with that I think might come out really well. Yeah,
that's nice. There's a lot of reflectivity there to be able to say that and to then actually act upon it.
Yeah.
And what do you think that here at JMI Global there was a talk or a panel discussion about the role as well within the industry on the continent. Can you say a little bit about that, the role these festivals and this one in particular plays or should play or could play?
Well, I think right now, like the role that we're playing, especially like from a Zimbabwean context, is that we're just that alternative festival space. I think because we work more with your urban, underground, hip hop, unknown. I'm doing air quotes for those who are listening in case my voice isn't inflecting well. But like, those kind of artists that are like very, indie and stuff like that, that won't get like the commercial airplay. They won't get put on these big, events that these big promoters put up. So for us, it's mostly about giving those artists that platform and also getting them to reimagine what being a Zimbabwean artist is. So we like to pair them up with like international artists. So we'll have like 1 or 2 international artists featuring and performing, but it's not like that we say that you're separate from the international artists, but the whole night, it belongs to everyone. And they also get a chance to interact with these artists and hear from them, learn from them, and kind of reimagine what, their career can look like. And then also like we've been trying to do like a festival circuit in the region. We slowed down a little bit because of COVID, but we're trying to bring that up again because we've started seeing that a lot of local artists, like especially the ones that we work with, once they do Shoko Festival, they're like, okay, we're done, we've made it in life. And then they call us again the next year, like, oh, can we perform again? And we're like, no, we want you to be at like Baimba Festival or Lake of Stars or MTN Bushfire. So we still have some connections with these other festivals and we try to plug in some of our artists, but we're trying to get them to see that like it doesn't stop with us. Like there are other festivals out there that would appreciate the content that you create and the value that you also bring to the table.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you actually try to give them a more sustainable perspective.
Yeah.
I see it a lot. I work a lot with artists, and a lot of them think that they have this one hit or this one performance, and that's it. And then I would say, and what's the next one?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean?
It's like, I have to do more?
Yeah.
I thought I was done.
We call this the digital heartbeat. It has to keep eating when you have to go from peak to peak to stay relevant.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that's what it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So we're hoping that changes. And I think it's just, depending again, like with the context of where like artists are and where they live, like with us in Zimbabwe, like the biggest thing is I need to perform and get airplay. But airplay in Zimbabwe like doesn't pay anything. And like you talk to these artists and they're like, oh, I want to be a recording artist. And I'm like, yeah, in Zimbabwean context again, like I get that you can try and like, you know, get your music on movies and series and things like that. But I'm like, again, you're one artist in Zimbabwe competing with like 50 million artists all over the world. Like you need to look at what makes sense for you locally, you know, and so that you can build your career from here and then, start building out.
Yeah. So start sustainably and then expand.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, but like artists aren't reasonable. Like I'm an artist too, so I'm allowed to say that.
Well, I work with artists and I can say it from that perspective.
So
with all respect.
With all respect.
Yeah, because I love dreamers too.
Yeah.
Talking about dreams and hopes, like what are you the most excited about that's happening right now in the wider space?
I think just that everyone's kind of looking in the same direction. I've been on a lot of different like panels and like a lot of different organizations and CSOs that have relationships with the creative industry where they're again looking towards the creative industry. I think before it was more of, the creative industry is just like an appendage to like what we're trying to do. So now I think a lot of institutions, a lot of CSOs are looking at creatives for these solutions. And what's also really interesting to me is that it's also in an African because normally Africa were like the last ones to catch on, but like I'm seeing it kind of happening simultaneously with like the rest of the world where everyone is like, okay, we used to approach it from the context of the artists come in as like an appendage, like we were the trophy wives, but now, you know, we're being looked at as, you know, an actual entity that can, you know, assist in problem solving and, you know, contributing to the economy of a country and things like that. So I'm really excited for that. I think what just needs to happen is there just needs to be a bit more unity amongst the artists in the creative sector. I think sometimes you have a situation where it's like musicians are going to be by ourselves and then the dancers like fend for yourselves. But I think if we all come together as a combined industry, there'll be more impact because you have the numbers and, you know, there is a lot of strength in numbers. I don't know, it's a conflicting thing, but I love what's happening like in Hollywood with the writers and the actors that like them coming together, because that's just getting people to kind of realize that, oh snap, like they know that if they come together things will change. So just hoping for more things like that to happen like across the world and across all like different genres of the creative industry.
And before we started recording, we talked a little bit about AI.
We haven't started. What's happening?
I'm pressing no. We talked a little bit about AI.
Yeah.
And you shared some concerns and maybe some opportunities as well. Can you say a few things about that? It's a big topic, but relevant.
Yeah. We'll try and summarize this in 10 seconds. Okay. I guess with the AI thing, okay, what I find exciting and great about it is like I feel like, you know, artists like Aaliyah and Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson, Miriam Makeba, I feel like their last albums really, like, I'm like, my children will never hear like a new song by these artists, or unless I play that music consistently for them, they probably won't know that that music existed. So I think that potential of hearing what these artists would have sounded like or could be like in this new age that we're living in, I think that potential is really great and interesting. Where my fear and reservations come in is just that I know now like there's obviously the issue of like copyright and blah, blah, blah. Like no one can just like take your voice and use it for something else. But I also just feel like on TikTok, I've been seeing a lot of, you know, people experimenting with AI. And now TikTok is like the in thing, and like there's no copyright that comes along with that. Like someone can just upload a video with that audio on TikTok, and then it's like, well, I'm not making money from it. But I don't know, I feel like they'll get to a point where people are like, well, I mean, so can't we just like release the tracks? Like, and can't the radio just like play the music? And then like Vera goes and performs on stage and people are like, what? We want to hear that AI song that you did. It's like, no, it wasn't me. It was just some random person who was like, I wonder what Vera would sound like singing like a Beyonce type song, you know? I also think there's an element of, I'll just say it, like laziness that'll kind of, permeate, like where you can just type in, I want a song that sounds a little bit like jazz, a little bit like hip hop, and like rock and roll, and then like AI will just create that. But I'm such a big fan of like organically what people just naturally bring into something. Like when I perform with other artists or other bands, I'm not very particular. I just say that, listen, as long as the chord progression is the same, like I'm good to do as you wish with the song, because I feel like it needs to be like that combined effort. But when like a computer is making this, I don't know, like for me, the authenticity kind of like just disappears from that. I'm also just like not a fan of like backtracks also. So I think it's just like a addition to my hateration towards technology. Yeah. I'm not a technophobe. I feel like technology just isn't kind to me sometimes.
It's moving so fast, and also we haven't solved our rights situation just for humans at all. Right? Like here on the continent, but globally. There's too many problems with that. Yeah. And then there's this technology that pops up that's moving way faster than humans can ever move. Yeah. And we always have to regulate afterwards, which is a problem. Yeah. So it's going to create these gaps. My hope is that music is inherently spiritual and human, and that AI is just not, so that it will never really become anything of real value except for the kind of playing around with like, oh, this is what Michael Jackson would have sounded. I mean, which is, it's like a fun thing to do. Yeah, yeah. But that's my hope. I don't know if it's actually going to be like that. Like, I just don't know.
True. I think like in the back of my mind, I was thinking about it the other day where I was like, yes, artwork can be, like AI can literally do everything. But like, you know how when like the Industrial Revolution happened and like, you know, things were being made by machines, but now you have this big appreciation for handmade crafts. So it could be a diamond and then they're like, oh, but this one is handcrafted by, you know, barefoot Indians or something crazy like that. And like that creates more value for it. So I feel like eventually like it has to go full circle. So yes, AI will be the end thing and everyone will be like, oh, this is so cool. And then it'll get back to the point like, oh my gosh, do you know that this song was actually sung by a human being? And the guitar was like hand played by human fingers. Oh my gosh, so authentic. Yeah. So, and that might also just increase the value of, you know, that, yeah, so I'm hoping that also might happen. It also, like with, you know, painting, I think that's also just another thing where I'm like, painters must be like, what the hell, AI? Like, come on. And then you have like this computer will just like make all of these crazy, beautiful, like I won't take it away from computers. Like the artwork is fantastic, but like, you know, as an artist, you learn to like draw and then you have to perfect that. And this takes like maybe 10 years of your life, and then a computer does it in 5 seconds. 5 seconds. And then people buy it, and they're like, well, I'm not going to pay $500,000 for that when I can just type it.
Yep. Oh, and it wins award shows. It's like, that's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's scary.
My hope for music is that, same for art, that's, but especially for music maybe, is that AI can do some things well, but it really not at this moment cannot do one thing, which I think is very important. It cannot really innovate, because you can say, can you make this sound like a Beyonce song? Yeah. And then it just merges, it learns from Beyonce songs and it learns from your music and it creates. But funky jazz is not something that you woke up one day and you say like, oh, I want funky jazz and it should sound like this. It's like a, you know, you've been, you know, because of the band you've been working with, because of your own sound, because of all these things, it's like a progressive thing. And now you can let an AI listen to your music and say, this is what I call funky jazz. Can you make more of this? And then it will probably be okay making something like that. But music is so, like, you know, music always develops and changes. And I hope that is something that's deeply human. You know? Because I think that mostly comes from experimentation and coming together, and also, you know, trying things, making mistakes, like doing something crazy, and you're like, wow, that's actually pretty cool. AI can do that. I hope.
That's true. I mean, I heard a very interesting story around, I don't know how far true it is, but I'm going to believe it because like I'm very like, what's the word? Naive. Yes. So the story I heard was with Rumba, which like the African Rumba, not like the South American one, but rumba, and in Zimbabwe we have like a genre called jit music, also sungura and museve. So the theory behind that, and one day when, you know, I'm rich and famous, I'm going to do research into it, is that the colonizers, when they kind of started leaving and things like that, they left these instruments with the Africans, and they didn't tune the guitars. Because when you play, like especially Museve and Sungura music, the guitar tuning it's its own kind of guitar tuning, and it's very weird and awkward. Like I know you can do that with like a lot of like Western music, but like here it's like it's kind of just seems like it doesn't make sense. And like the whole theory was that these guys just got the guitars and just started playing, and they're like, oh, until it sounded nice, and then they created a sound that sounded nice. And I'm like, again, that's a very authentic, unique human kind of creation of like taking an out of tune guitar and then like, oh, this sounds pretty, we're just gonna keep playing it like this.
That's a beautiful example.
Yeah,
because no one is gonna type in play off-tune guitar in exactly these keys or off keys, and then let's see how it sounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that story.
Yeah, so like it's an urban legend. I don't know how far true it is, but yes.
Yeah, what I see the most potential, and also in a kind of helpful way, is that I think AI can kind of do a lot of things that artists now have to do that they don't really like doing, like creating copies for social media and those kind of things that can be a little bit
true.
You know, take a lot of time. That is something that AI could do. So it
can
also have benefits.
Yeah, I guess also like in terms of like mixing and mastering, like that's always like a really big issue I have with like producers. Like I do get that, yes, there is that, you know, the human ear can do like all of these crazy things, but I'm also just like sometimes like producers are really expensive, and you have these really talented artists that want to release music, but like they just can't afford to pay a producer like $500 for one track. So I think, you know, if that kind of availability of AI, where maybe I'm just paying for software and I pay like $100, but I can release like 60 tracks and mixed and mastered beautifully, like that's also another great potential. I think also like even in the assistance of inspiration, because I think sometimes again, like as artists, I think people think that we're just like this endless, you know, we're just out here sitting and, like I was going to say something quite crude, but like pumping out, you know, ideas and amazing music. But like sometimes you just need like inspiration, you know, so just be like, oh, what would Janelle Monáe sound like singing a Nina Simone song? And then you'd listen to that and you're like, ooh, okay, I now want to write something in line with this. So
yeah, that's a nice potential as well. And same, this podcast, I'm not a podcaster, I could just thrown into podcasting world, and I really like it, but I'm specifically not good into mixing and mastering, so I used to do that hand mixed without any experience, and some people said the podcast didn't always sound as good as I was hoping that it would. Now we're mastering with AI.
Yeah, okay, so
it works really well.
That's great, perfect, you see? Yeah,
that's opportunities. And for you, in terms of your music career, like what's coming? What are you excited about?
Oh, wow. So again, like I'm on my uppage in like my career, which is really exciting. So currently I'm performing at 4 festivals in like 4 weeks. So basically someone was like, oh my gosh, so you're like touring, festival touring. I was like, yeah. It's all local though, but that's still really just very exciting for like me and the band. We're also looking at touring Italy next year, so we're just trying to like get some plans around that, because my drummer's Italian, he's just based in Zimbabwe, married to a Zimbabwean, so he's like, oh my gosh, we should go to Italy. So we're like, great, and we'll all live in your mother's house because we're family now. So that's also just really exciting. I also am working on a personal project, which has kind of been like a passion project for me. So I got funding I'm always about trying to create different ways that people experience like the creative arts, and also just like not just doing music for music's sake, but to tell a story. And just in general with art, I just feel like that's what it should do. That's the purpose it serves. And so we're working on this project called Humanize. We're going to release it on the 9th of December, just before International Human Rights Day. And the idea behind it is basically to tell the stories of marginalized communities from their perspective, because a lot of times, so how this whole thing came up, sorry, I keep backtracking. We had a journalist that came through to our workplace, and he wanted to write stories around the LGBTQIA plus community. So he asked me to sit in one of the interviews because the space we run is like a safe space. And then he asked me to connect him with people from the community. So we do the interview, he releases the interview, and then I was talking to a couple of my queer friends, and they were like, the way this guy wrote the story, it's like terrible. So I was like, okay, maybe we need to just create more platforms for you to have conversations with journalists. Because I was like, I think his intentions were great, but obviously the delivery wasn't perfect. So the idea behind this project is just to do that, is to get people from these different marginalized communities to tell their own stories. So I put out like a survey with very offensive questions because I wanted honest responses, like why people feel the way they feel and like the typical negative perceptions and things like that. And then when we're done, we're going to create 3 songs, 3 dance pieces, and 3 mini documentaries, and a photo exhibition. And then we're going to kind of like showcase that and see if, you know, people start to change their perception and things like that. So it's a really exciting project. It's great to also go back into the studio and write. Like, I'm not going to be the music director. It's going to be the people we're kind of basing the whole exhibition on that are going to help me with the music direction, the songwriting as well. So I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds super exciting.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's an unfortunate reality that sometimes people come in from outside with good intentions to write a nice story or to create something good, and then
it just doesn't quite like hit the mark.
It doesn't translate.
Yeah. I think it's just like an unfortunate kind of situation that we have, and I think it's because of also the history of how certain stories have been told. So like with women, it's like, oh, she managed to break the glass ceiling. I'm just like, or maybe she was just like, I don't know. I have a problem with these like pity stories, like, oh, you know, he was disabled, born with one toe, and like, you know, he had to survive the hardship of whatever. But like, there's also a whole other person besides, you know, the disability. And a lot of times when you look at someone with a disability, it's always like, oh, shame, I feel sorry for them. But like, they're fine, like they're actually good. So the one guy we're working with, he makes fun of himself all the time, and he's just so comfortable, you know, with his situation. And I love that. And I'm like, I think people need to hear that side of your story, not to be like, oh, he was born like this, and you know, his sister has to look after him, and like, that's not the story he wants out there. So
yeah, good. Yeah, it's unfortunate that these stories sell apparently as well.
They do. That's the thing. It's like the African story. Like, you know, there's this joke on TikTok where someone like made this video, and they're like, every documentary about Africa, and it's like, see Peter, he has 15 children. He wakes up at 5 a.m. to, you know, feed the cows in the field. I'm like, or maybe Peter has a whole business that's running very successfully.
Do you know this Africa for Norway? Oh, you should check it out. It's hilarious. Okay. It's a bunch of Norwegians, I'd say, because I think it's Norwegian. Yeah. But from African descent. I mean, that's my guess.
Okay.
And they make this parody video
okay.
where they have these images of just people in snow freezing to death and like cars driving off the road, and that's the only image. And then it's called Radiate. Donate your radiator, and then there's like clips. It's a parody. It's like people going all over Africa, and then they driving with trucks, and people can donate their radiator, and then they have a song, like a typical song where it's like, oh, people are freezing in Norway, and it's like this kind of very, very, very funny but very critical way of saying like, you know, if you only show one thing that people are freezing, and then make it all about that, and then put people in a nice video clip and like sing together and like about the freezing people. I love that one. It's really
that's great.
It's really good.
I'll definitely check it out. But yeah, that's literally like always the case. Like every time I travel, because I've been traveling quite a bit, like with work and stuff, and like the questions I get asked, like someone will ask me like, how did you get here? When I'm like, I'm from Africa. How did you get here? The same way you travel from like one continent to another, we also have planes and airlines that work pretty great. And like sometimes I just find it really amusing. I mean, my friend and I went to the States, and we went around we were like, we should go around and just tell people that, you know, we're from Wakanda, and just see how many people would actually believe that. And it's crazy when you watch like these TikTok interviews when, you know, people ask like, how many countries are in Africa? Or can you name a country in Africa? Zimbabwe's been mentioned like 3 or 4 times, which is very impressive. But like other times, like people make up the wildest names, and I'm like, we definitely need to, like, I don't know, especially in the world that we're living in now, like there's so much access to this information. I feel like there shouldn't be so much disinformation and like really warped perspectives of like anywhere in the world. Because I mean, also in Africa, like going to the States for the first time, I was like, oh my God, am I going to get shot? Like that was literally my automatic like feeling. I was like, would it be safe to walk in this neighborhood by ourselves as like girls? And like it was so safe. And I was like, okay, clearly like the media's not selling the right kind of stories and experiences. So yeah.
Yeah, it's what sells.
Yeah, true. Again.
And both ways, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Norway is freezing, guys.
Donate your radiator.
Exactly. Difficult question, but in 5 years, what are your hopes?
Ooh, to be a billionaire. I'm joking. Okay. In 5 years, I'm hoping to be performing a lot more. I think that's just something that I really do want to happen. And also just I have my own creative hub that I run. So the hope is to leave Magamba and be fully working with my creative hub, helping out young artists and also just creating these different kind of experiences for how people interact with like the creative industry. I think another thing, 5 years, that's like far but close. Just having traveled a bit more. I love traveling. It's always just like something that inspires me, just going wherever. It can literally be like to another neighborhood in Zimbabwe. But like just traveling a bit more around the world and just meeting different people. Such an extrovert. I love to meet different people and just have random conversations because like I think great ideas come out of that. So yeah, that as well.
And if people want to connect with you or with the festival or anything, where can they find you? Where can they find the festival?
I'm on every single social media platform except for, I'm joking, no, I think all of them, except for the new one, Threads. Not going to do that. But as Vera ZW. And then for the festival, it's Shoko Festival, SHOKO Festival. And again, you can find that on all social media platforms except for Threads.
As always.
As always.
The last question. What is the power of music?
Oh gosh. Okay. So the power of music. I don't know. It's kind of like music is extremely powerful. Look at me using the words that you used in the question. And I will give an example. You can go to... Okay, I was in Lebanon 2 weeks ago and we were attending this festival and they were singing in like Arabic and I did not understand a word they were saying, but just from the way they were singing and the way the music was like kind of put together, I got the gist of like, you know, the story that was being told. And I think that's what the power of music is that you don't have to say words. Yes, I know every song has like words, but like, it doesn't have to be words that you understand. And that's what makes it so powerful is that it can just evoke any emotion in you. It can heal you. Music is so healing. And it can also just get you to start changing your perception or your perspective around things. I mean, I've had times where I'll listen to Adele and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be listening to Adele as much because it's making me very depressed, like when she heard a lot of sad music. And, you know, there are times when you listen to, like I have like playlists where I have like these motivational songs because like, you know, it's talking about, you know, you're a bad girl, like you got this, you're a hustler, you make things work. And, you know, it just helps with changing your mood. And so I think music is just really powerful because it can change your perception, your feeling, your ideologies, and it can cut across so many different things. And in everything that we do, there is music in it. The way you walk, the way you sleep, the way you talk, there's like a rhythm to that. So it's just in everything that we do. And I think it's really important to put some respect on music.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for listening. If you want more information about JM or you would like to get involved, visit www.jmi.net. At JMI, we are on a mission to make the world more musical. That's why we created Mubazar, a digital platform that helps us manage all our musical activities across 80 countries worldwide, connecting musicians with opportunities to grow both personally and professionally. If you are a music professional Looking for a better way to manage and promote your music activities? Check out Mubazar. Created for music organizers, by music organizers, Mubazar allows you to run music competitions, workshops, camps, auditions, masterclasses, awards, events, and much more. Mubazar offers custom application forms, payments for your activities, jury tools, translations, analytics, and more. Mubazar is fast becoming the best place for musicians to find and apply for music opportunities online, and you can sign up today for a free organizer account by going to www.mubazar.com, registering, and then requesting to upgrade to an organizer on the right-hand menu. For more info, don't hesitate to get in touch via support@mubazar.com. It would mean a lot to us if you could give us 1 minute of your time and rate and review the podcast. In case you have any suggestions or would like to be one of our next guests, feel free to reach out to us through the JMI socials.